Hey everybody, Travis Robbins from the Physical Resilience Outlook, Robbins Rehabilitation West. I'm here with Dan and Nick, my trusty sidekicks, in our adventure into the Sandbag lift. Uh, Nick, we're going to talk about, how we selected these 10 movements, but where does this rank in importance? I'm putting you on the spot here. And in terms of if you were going to rank important things, I know last time we talked about, what did we talk about last time? I can't remember that you'd
Farmer's
like.
carry.
Farmer's carry, Nick's favorite. We all know that. But sandbag lift, why did this make it into here? And if you're gonna rank these, where do you think it ranks?
Well, we have to do an episode totally on
We should.
rankings.
I
Yeah.
know that would be great. We could draft them. We could do three-person draft.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. I'm gonna say this is in the middle of the pack,
Okay.
right? I don't have an exact. I'm not gonna spoil this for everybody, right? You have to listen to that one.
Okay.
Um, but it kind of goes middle of the pack for me, right? Because it still does do a whole lot, right? Like think about every time, like I'm looking down at the floor right now. It's like every time you have to bend down to pick something up, and you don't always just get to pick it up and just like carry it. Like you might have to lift it up too, set it on another shelf. If you're taking stuff off of a shelf, I mean, and having to set it down. So I just like the an unstable thing that you have to just pick up either or set down to the ground, and you have to go through more than just lifting it to your waist. Like you have to lift it up to the shoulders. So there's a lot of strengthening for the legs. There's a lot of strengthening for the upper back, the shoulders, just the whole trunk as well.
Yeah, it's a valuable movement. There's several times a day that you probably have to do some form of this, and every once in a while you're going to have to do a large form of this. So when I'm struggling with a patient to try to find some goals in terms of what they need to be able to accomplish to say that physical therapy was successful, a lot of times I will go to what is like the heaviest thing you have to lift. And sometimes they have to dig a little bit. I'm like, do you have a dog? Like that a dog is can be large and doesn't have handles on it. So it's like you have to be able to lift and be able to move something. Now, a lot of times you're picking up stuff that's not necessarily alive and can fight you. But bags of salt, like if you have a water softener, if you have to get dog food for this dog, it's a very dog-centric podcast today. But every once in a while, I remember when I was a kid, I had a friend of mine
Picking
who
up little kids. There you go.
little kids, yeah, yep, for sure. But I remember there was a friend of mine that had a father that was not in good shape. So every year he would call me up and say, "Hey, can you get my snowblower out of the basement?" And that is a large thing. That's not a one man or one woman lift, but it's kind of an awkward thing that you have to lift up, and sometimes you even have to carry it upstairs. So we feel as though the sandbag lift is important because you should be able to pick up heavy things and move them, even if you're only doing that like maybe once or twice once a year. You should be able to do that. So Dan, why don't you tell us what the sandbag lift is? It sounds kind of straightforward, but let's be more technical.
Yeah, so similar to like a deadlift, if you've ever lifted weights, used a barbell, we're just using more of an awkward object, so a sandbag or whatever you have really to pick up, loaded in front of you. You're just bending down, picking that up, and then getting it up to shoulder height just to kind of simulate any like functional activities you would do. But yeah, that's pretty much it. You're gonna like hinge down through the hips like a deadlift. You'll have to turn it into a little bit more of a squat with the sandbag and then hoist it up on the shoulder.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Nick, why don't we just do a straight bar deadlift? Got handles, you can grab onto it. Why do we want to pick something like a sandbag as opposed to something that has handles?
Well, because now we're getting really just so many more components. Like where we talked of like the instability of it, right? Where any of those things that we're doing around the house usually don't have handles on that are neatly placed and perfectly on the floor where you can just get right under and pick it up. No, here you have to use that grip, that forearm strength to be able to get up underneath something as well. And then it's not perfectly balanced, right? So you have to be the one doing the balancing to take that from the floor all the way up to the shoulder.
And as in all of our movements, if you're having pain while you're doing this, if you're doing this at home without the supervision of a physical therapist, then we want you to stop. But Dan, what are some common errors that people will make when trying to, do this test, but even today, if someone's not necessarily doing the test, but they have something big and heavy they have to pick up, what are things they're going to mess up?
Mostly, I would say people would avoid like bending their knees or bending them too much. You can go both ways. You don't want to lift completely with your back and like the legs straight, but it also shouldn't be like a pure squat. So you're gonna use your hips to start and then kind of roll the sandbag or whatever object you're using up on the thighs. And then it's going to turn into a squat from there, just so you can kind of propel it up to your shoulder.
Okay. And in terms of scoring this movement, we expect males to be handling 70 pounds and females to be handling. You can do more than that. Great. But that was how we set the scale for this. And we feel like you should be able to do 10 reps. And remind me on the testing, Nick, if we're doing 10 reps, then it's going to be 5 on each side, or what does that look
Yep.
like?
And that's exactly it. 5 on each side to make sure that you're not extremely imbalanced. Like, oh yeah, you could do 10 on one side, but you can't get a single one to the other side.
Okay. So if someone could only do 5 on one side, they didn't feel comfortable doing it on one side, the max score they would be able to get would be 5.
Yep.
Okay. And we keep that weight pretty much no matter how old you are. So some people might have some pushback there. Dan, how about this? If I say, hey, I'm 80 years old, I don't really feel like I should have to be able to pick up 70 pounds to get a perfect score in this movement, then tell me why I'm wrong.
So the number of reps does decrease, but yeah, the weight doesn't. And that's more just to kind of show that this is more like a functional lift and it's replicating like the real world. So you're going to use like a bag of mulch, bag of dog food, whatever you're looking at. That's not going to get lighter as you get older. So you still have to pick it up. So you got to keep that strength.
Wow, that was a great summary. This bag of mulch is not going to get lighter as you get older. But to further explain what Dan means, if your age is 20 to 39, we expect you to do 10 reps of this at 70 pounds. If your age is 40 to 59, we expect you to do 9 reps. If your age is 60 to 79, we expect you to do 7. And if you're over 80, we're expecting 5. So it's correct, the same amount of weight, but you're expected to do less reps of that. So we talked about a couple of reasons why this is important. Nick, any other sales pitch on why you should be able to pick up heavy things? Let's speak specifically to a lot of patients that we see where they are told by their medical professionals, hey, I don't ever want you to lift over this amount of weight ever again. Why is it important to continue to lift heavy things as you get older?
Bone, muscle, right? Like just making sure that not getting into the osteoporosis, the sarcopenia, so like loss of bone, loss of muscle. Here's just a good way to really start to load that. Like this is going to be one of the heavier things that we have as far as like the pro testing goes. So yeah, it's going to be a big deal to avoid either of those, but also just staying strong, right? This will help reduce really risk of injury when you are lifting, picking anything up in general.
Yeah. And then, why people lose this as they age, that's pretty straightforward. They just stop lifting up heavy things for one reason or another. Some people just have the mindset of, well, I'm getting older, so I should do that less. Some have been told by medical professionals they shouldn't do this at all. That's a quick way to lose your strength as you get older. The negative consequences of this are that you just get less resilient and you have to rely on other people in order to do household things. And you start to narrow your activity, which we have talked a ton about on our podcasts. But Dan, we'll kind of go off the script here a little bit. If someone says, I agree, I've not been told by anybody that I can't lift something up, what would be a reasonable kind of start? Let's say somebody is in their 60s and they have not purposely avoided lifting heavy things for a long time, but maybe they just are in our society. You can kind of get away with that unless you have a physical labor job. You can get away with not lifting up heavy things for long periods of time. What would be the starting point? They say, I want to be able to lift 70 pounds up to my shoulder, but I don't feel super confident or safe doing it right now. What would be your suggestion?
It's hard to say without seeing them, but depending on like who they are, I would say like men and women, I would say men maybe start with 20, 30 pounds, something like that. Women 10 to 20, somewhere in that range. Just build up some repetitions first. Try to get like 5 on each side with that weight. Do like 3 sets of that and then see how you feel the next day. If you're crazy sore, use that weight for a couple workouts. If you're not sore at all, bump it up another 5 or 10 pounds next time. And just, yeah, build up slowly 5 or 10 pounds each workout.
Yeah. And in terms of equipment that you need, we have these really cool bags at work that are pretty much indestructible. We haven't broken one yet, but you can throw them around and slam them. I would say if you're going to the hardware store and getting a bag of like concrete that is a certain amount of weight, like that's not designed to be necessarily, slammed onto the ground a bunch of times. In terms of equipment suggestions, if people don't want to go out and get a specific, we have these like, I don't know what the heck they are made out of, this like vinyl or something that they're designed to be thrown around. Nick, what suggestions would you give to somebody that wants to start in terms of equipment?
If you're looking for weights, I mean, again, a small dumbbell still works here. You can still grab it by the handles or something just to take up to the shoulder. Is it the best? No, it's not the best, but it's still going to work. Like it's going to get you stronger doing this movement. Um, Even other things that we've talked about on some of the other podcasts, like if you have a gallon jug, right? Like that's a little bit more awkward. Don't try not to use the handle on it, right? So like put your hands around it, take that to the shoulder because there you're going to at least get 8 pounds. So really, it's anything that's weighted is going to work. Actually, I for my blueberry bushes just picked up uh, pine bark from the one of the stores, right? And it was actually much lighter, right, than a bag of cement like you were talking before. So if you want to train with something that's a little awkward but actually a whole lot lighter, you can even get something like that.
Yeah, pretty much anything works. I mean, we're in Pennsylvania. If you need a rock, you can just go into any part of my yard and shove a shovel in the ground because you're not going to find anything but rocks. But if you're not somewhere where there's a lot of rocks, then try to find something that's awkward. And if it does have an handle, avoid trying to use the handle because that will work on that grip strength, which we've talked about in terms of the importance of doing that. In terms of programming for this, Dan, you did all the programming. So if people are on the lower end of being able to do the weights that we have suggested, besides just doing the movement, which for a lot of these is a good idea, what are other things that they can do in order to improve their score in this movement?
Yeah, so you can start with simple stuff like squats, deadlifts, just to build up that leg strength. There will be definitely some kind of stretching in there with this. Like with this lift, especially as you get heavier, you will have to get into a pretty deep squat, have a good amount of like spinal flexion, be able to bend your back, which most people can't do that too well, just to kind of mold around the heavy object as you lift it. Those are going to be the basic things, but yeah, a lot of leg strength. Definitely some core stuff too. You can do like planks, side planks, just to be able to brace that load, especially as it gets heavier. As it's lighter, you won't need that as much. It'll be more legs, but once you get to like the big, heavy, odd object, you'll need a good amount of core strength.
All right, and then just wrapping up in terms of final thoughts on if you have somebody that is maybe not convinced, like, I don't know, I can get around pretty easily without having to lift heavy stuff up. I don't know if this is that important. What would be things that you would say to someone that might fight you on the importance of this movement? Nick, you can go first.
I mean, if they're fighting you on it, why don't you fight them back, right? Let show them that you can do this. Now, uh, just again, I think it comes down to a lot of what we said before. Is like just being able to do all of the things that you want to do as you get older. To me, that's the big thing. I don't want to sacrifice any stuff that I do with my kids, anything that I do around the yard, with pets, with any of that. Like if you want to keep it up and be able to do it independently, here's a good one to keep up with doing it.
Yeah, how about you, Dan?
Yeah, I'm not gonna force anyone to do it, but I mean, I'm sure if they're seeing us, they're in for a reason, and I'm sure one of those reasons is something like picking up grandkids or being able to do yard work and not have to ask for help. So if they want to do it, they're gonna have to do some kind of exercise.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys remember this, but I think it was a couple of years ago. There was a commercial that was out, and it was a video of a guy in his garage or something, and he had this kettlebell, and he was lifting it up by the handles, and he was kind of like bending down, picking it up, and he was like lifting it overhead, and his neighbors, I think, were looking at him goofy, and then he gets to Christmas, and he grabs his granddaughter and holds her up, and then she puts the star on top of the tree. So it's the importance of being able to like lift things can be significant to people in their lives. And if they can't lift things, there's going to be things that they're going to have to cut out. So yeah, and as most of these, if you can lift heavy stuff, you're just going to be harder to kill. I'm just convinced that that's a thing. So all right, that's it for now. Catch us on other podcasts with these movements in the future. And Nick, do you want to sign us out?
Here's to better health through better understanding.
All right, guys, talk to you soon.